Hello, Talofa Lava, and welcome back to the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg. My guest today is Matt Brown. Matt is a New Zealand-born Samoan. He is an internationally acclaimed barber. He's a hair artist. This dude cut Tupac Shakur into someone's head. He's an incredible communicator, husband, father, and he is known for giving great cuts and inspiring great men. This dude is also the survivor of family violence, childhood sexual abuse, and he is the founder of an organization called She Is Not Your Rehab. He also works with a couple different prisons to facilitate a barbering program. He works with youth justice facilities, and he started his business in a garden shed in his backyard near Christchurch. And he founded She Is Not Your Rehab with his wife. They launched the concept in a TED Talk, which is so good. I reference it a couple times in this conversation. And essentially, the idea behind She Is Not Your Rehab is to invite men to acknowledge their own childhood trauma so that they can take responsibility for their healing and transform the pain instead of transmitting it to those around them, including their partners and loved ones. This conversation that we have is wonderful. Matt is an open book. He talks very honestly and vulnerably about his own childhood, about his abuse that he suffered, the consequences of that abuse. So consider this a trigger warning that we get into some deeper conversations. And he's just a good dude. I have a lot of time for what he's doing, and I'm really proud of the work that he's doing. I believe in it. I think it's powerful and transformative, particularly the unique, authentic manner with which he communicates and starts these conversations. It's fantastic. I really think you're going to dig this one, and I hope that you check out Matt Brown, check out She Is Not Your Rehab website. They've got t-shirts that are pretty badass, and get in his space, get in his world, give him a follow. He also ended up getting The Rock involved. We talk about that a little bit in this dialogue, and all right, enough of me. Here's Matt Brown. I have your consent to record our podcast, hopefully. And Matt Brown, welcome to the podcast, brother. I'm very excited to connect with you. I just watched your TED Talk a little bit ago, but for the average human that's listening right now that has no idea who Matt Brown is, what you do, what you're about, how do you describe yourself? Like, who are you? What's your deal, Matt?
Oh man, I would first say, I always say I'm a father first, father and a husband. I'm happily married, but in my spare time, I cut hair. I'm a barber, a hair artist, an educator in the hair industry. And yeah, we do a lot of men's work through the barbershop. We facilitate a lot of therapy sessions, working alongside therapists and counselors who have been doing the work for 20 plus years. And we hold a lot of, we do spaces and hold space in men's prison throughout New Zealand.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier that I've done now over 130 episodes, and you're the very first barber that's been on the program. Yeah, you're the first one, the champion. But I wanted to start with sort of your background, because I know that we're going to dive into some issues related to family violence, domestic violence, and also the men's work and the kind of movement that you've created with masculinity in general. But I thought it might be helpful to explore some of the background information, like maybe from your early days, as to why this is such an important issue to discuss. You're obviously into the domestic violence space. You are working with men to create a new kind of masculinity. And one of the things that I was most struck by in your TED Talk was that you chose a single word to define your childhood, and that word was unsafe. And I'm wondering if you could expand on that a little bit for us.
See, my upbringing, I grew up in a family of 5 siblings, 5 boys and 4 sisters. I grew majority of my childhood was with my brothers, my full-blooded brothers. My sisters are all half. half sisters, and here we were subjected to things that children should never ever be a witness: sexual violence, physical violence, mental abuse, verbal abuse. Everything under the sun that children should not have to experience was my upbringing. And I didn't know that it wasn't normal. To me, it was very normal. I talk about in my TED Talk that my first experience of domestic violence was at the age of 3. I vividly remember my father picking up the Christmas tree and beating the shit out of my mother with it. And, we just, as children ourselves, and my older brothers, jumped on top of mum, trying to protect her from our angry, outraged father, who just couldn't regulate his emotions, and rage seemed to be the only outlet that he could express himself. I was subjected to sexual abuse at a young age, and you never forget that stuff. You never forget the feelings of another man's, private parts on your body. I still remember the flickering lights. I still remember their scents, their fragrance, their perfumes. And so when I say unsafe, it's the very definition to the root of that definition of what unsafe means was my upbringing. And we would go to school thinking that, other kids had experienced the same kind of culture we had experienced. But when kids would talk about, their family outings or their parents, showing up to their rugby games not drunk, I just thought, man, what the heck is this? Like, this is like our father. He would show up to our rugby games off his face, And I remember I have one incident that's vivid in my mind. I was a kid and we're at my older brother's game. And I remember my father disagreed with a call the referee had made. And so my father, in his rage, started verbally abusing the ref from the sideline. And the referee stopped the game. And he said, if you don't get off the field, pointing to my father, I'm going to call this game off. And so my father did walk off the field, walked to the car, and opened up the trunk, grabbed his machete, and ran onto the field chasing after the referee. And that made like news headlines and everything. But that was just normal. Like, we were little kids watching that, and we were laughing. We thought it was hilarious. And you're watching our friends next to us, just like, what the heck? Your dad's crazy. Like, this is so not cool. And we were standing there laughing. But that's how normal the violence was in our household. So I share that story to paint what normality was for us.
Yeah, so your dad was drunk and chasing the referee around with a machete.
Yes.
And because you were so used to seeing events like that, you guys were just kind of joking around. So you didn't realize how abnormal your childhood was. Like, at what point did you start to ask questions or realize that you were living a very different kind of life than most?
I suppose going to school, and what I was sharing before, when friends would share their experiences with home life and parents, and or even having a normal meal, like we would go days without meals, but just because we couldn't afford it, or money would go on alcohol, on booze, or my parents will end up at the pokie machines. And so it was then going to school and realizing that our upbringing was our friends would look at us and be like, yo, what you guys are going through is, or what you guys are living through is not normal. And teachers were obviously, story of my little brother went swimming, took off his top, and I remember the system, what we call SIFs, Oranga Tamariki today. They're an organisation that uplifts kids, takes kids away from homes where they're being abused. And so my older brother just, went swimming one day at school, and teacher seen that there were bruises, then reported it to the authorities. And by that night, my brother had been uplifted, taken off us. And I just remember, crying, like, why is my older brother going? Like, this was just weird. It was all little incidents like that made me realize, like, shit, our upbringing is not normal.
Yeah, and in your TED Talk, you alluded to like living in domestic violence shelters and your mom having physical signs of violence. Did anybody try to help, or were there other members of your family that knew what was going on, or did you?
I think people tried to help, and they I think and I remember some family members trying to have a conversation with our father, and I was just little, remembering this is me recording it from my lens as a child, but nothing came of it. Nothing came of it. I remember going to church, mum with her bruised face, wearing big black sunglasses inside, the four walls of church. And no one, I remember holding my mum's hand and that service, and no one came up to her asking if she was all right or, said anything. I remember our neighbors, I remember one time there was a fight, and I seen my next door neighbor open the curtain and looked, and then she see me looking at her, and then she closed the curtain straight away. It's like, I didn't feel like anyone helped me. People probably did, but through my lens, I don't believe anyone stood or did anything, because the only time the police would come around is because we, the children, or mum would ring up the police.
And then did that continue throughout your entire childhood, or did it get to a place at which your dad left, or that you moved out, or what happened?
It continued right up until, sadly, not so much of the physical violence, but the verbal abuse continued right up until weeks before my mum passed away. So it was right, all of us kids left home. I left home by the age of 15 because it was just such a volatile war zone. I had two options: either, continue living and be subjected to the violence, or suicide was a very strong companion of mine in my teenage years. And so I chose to leave home. I left home into a boys' home, which was surrounded with kids like me who grew up, fathers who were absent or not present, abusive parents. All of us had similar stories, and so all of us were just looking for a place of love and belonging.
And you found that in the home that you were living in?
Yep, I found it in the boys' home that I was living in for my teenage years. But I would still go back and visit mum and dad. It was, I suppose, I was trauma bond to them. This is all I ever knew. And so going back and still being respectful. I still remember the day I left home, mum held a machete to my neck, telling me, "You're not leaving." But I said, "Mum, there's nothing, what else can I do? It's either you do this or I'm going to do this to myself. So I need to go." And, but yeah, I picked my bags up that day crying, and mum was crying too. And I came back the next day and cried again to mum, and she said I'd done the right thing. And for her, it was the guilt and the shame of choosing to be my father's rehabilitation center. She chose to go back to him, hoping that every time she chose him, every time she chose to love him, that he would change. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing so openly, Matt. And you mentioned she was his rehabilitation center. So I feel like that's a good introduction to the work that you have started, this anti-violence movement called She Is Not Your Rehab. Do you want to share a bit about what that's about?
Yes, I give honor and credit to my beloved mother, who did pass away late last year in December. I stand on her shoulders, the story of witnessing my mother, in our shared trauma, being a rehabilitation center for a man who just never chose to do the work. And, I love my dear father. I'll always love my dear father. But I love my mother where it shouldn't have been her responsibility to do the work for him. She had her own stuff that she needed to heal from and be better at. And so I genuinely believe my mother, weeks before she passed away on her dying bed, I asked her the question I always ask her, and I asked her one more time, death has a thing of stripping everything away from us. And I asked my mum, why did you choose to go back to him time and time again? And her response was simple and beautiful. She said to me, son, I didn't have many options that you guys have today, that you kids have today. all I had was an organization back in the 90s, 80s and 90s here in New Zealand called Women's Refuge. And, you know, they had different houses across the country, across the city, where if, you know, you were abused or, you know, someone perpetuated violence, they were taking women and children. And so by the age of 10, I had lived in every woman's refuge home in my city, you know, and there was a few of them, but we had lived in every woman's refuge home, and that was such a normal home. Home wasn't really a building for me. Home was just where mum was. And so I've always felt safe to my mum. And for me, us starting this kaupapa, this movement, She Is Not Your Rehab, with my wife, was credit to my mum. You know, I this is me redeeming her story, transforming her pain, hoping that it encourages men to take responsibility of their own pain, their own shit, and stop transmitting it onto our women and our children. And it's also, you know, a movement for our women to be courageous and brave enough to say no. Enough is enough. But I also give credit to my wife. My wife is a strong woman who refused to be my rehab, who, you know, when I asked her to be my girlfriend, after 4 years of friendship where we just had boundaries, you know, I had trust. We both had trust issues, but we had boundaries. You know, she had a daughter, so any man that she was bringing into her life had to be a good man. And the day I asked my wife to be my girlfriend, she said, you know, she was dumbfounded at first. She was shocked because we'd just been friends. And it's like, how do we transition from friends to, you know, being boyfriend and girlfriend? And her words were simple to me, like, I love you and I will do this journey with you, but you have to get proper help for your addictions, for the stuff that you struggle with. And because I wanted to be with this woman, I couldn't see my life without her. I checked myself into therapy, into counseling, and was more open with my story with the men that sat in my chair. Because I just wanted to heal. I wanted to do better. You know, I wanted to start a family, and I didn't want to transmit my pain and my trauma onto my kids.
And so when she referenced you healing your stuff, she'd obviously seen that as a friend and had, I imagine, supported you through some of that. But then it was elevating to a new path of intimacy and connection. And she was like, nah, like, I'm not going there until you step up to this level. And you were kind of called forward, it sounds like.
Yeah, she definitely called me forward. Yeah, my wife, she worked for a non-profit organization, which they battled poverty, you know, in different countries, and human trafficking. My wife is very passionate about human trafficking. And so, you know, being subjected to sexual violence from a young age, that opened up doors to, you know, many things for me. And so my addiction to pornography was my my addiction. You know, a lot of my friends were doing, you know, coke, meth, weed, alcohol. My go-to was pornography. And so that was one of my struggles that I always struggled with. And my wife she educated me on that, on pornography, you know, the girls that you're looking at, you know. She humanized the people on the opposite screen. And she educated me very clearly on the effects it has on young boys, on young girls. And that was a journey we took on as friends. And so, you know, the thing with any addiction, it likes to hide itself very well. And because me and my wife, we started our friendship authentically from real places of transparency, I was always open to her about my struggles with pornography. And I wanted to get a hold of it because it had controlled my life. It was my escape. It was my place of euphoric when shit hit the fan. You know, when you grow up in an environment where it's hostile and it's a war zone, and the only good feeling you can hold on to is when you're being aroused. That's why pornography became my scapegoat. And so my wife walked with me through that journey. She sat with me in therapy. I still remember the first session I had in counseling. I walked out and I looked at her. I said, man, I'm pretty sure the counselor probably needs therapy now. But it's been a beautiful journey, you know, and yeah, it's been healing. Like she's not my rehab, but she's my safe place. She's my home. She's my encourager.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
But she does not put out with much shit.
I relate. I am dating a similarly inclined woman who has very high integrity and demands it of me. And I've learned a tremendous amount about myself, of what I'm really, really good at avoiding. And until she kind of puts the mirror up in front of me, it's like, oh, and it's very uncomfortable. And I find it to be very vulnerable, but also on the other side of that, as you recognize, there's tremendous strength and liberation there. So maybe we could talk about the work that you do with men, and perhaps why you think that's so important. I know in your TED Talk, you talk about the idea that men are wearing masks, and that we pretend, that we numb, that we are angry. What is going on with men today? I guess that's the $64 million question. It's like, what is happening, and what do we do about it? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, in the space that I work at as a barber, in my barbershops alone, I refuse to have anything that's going to take us, interrupt us from having genuine conversation. So I've refused to have TVs in the barbershop. It's not just a space where let's watch the sport. Like, if you want to watch sport, go to the pub across the road. If you want to watch, whatever, you can do that at home. You can be on your phone. So I try and encourage conversation. We need that human. These are Māori indigenous people saying here of New Zealand, of Aotearoa, is kanohi ki te kanohi, which is face to face. And often, Brene Brown says it, people are hard to hate close up, so lean in. And it's the honor of my career being a barber. It's there face up with these guys who sit in my chair, who are vulnerable enough to trust a stranger to make them look good. And so I want them walking out of my chair looking, not just looking good, but feeling good. Challenged, hopefully, but also encouraged and uplifted, that they are being, because men are not just angry, men are not just, crazy as society deems us. Like, there are so many beautiful men who are present, loving fathers who are showing up for themselves and their children and their wives than I ever thought. And so it's just highlighting that and calling men forward. Like, this is who you are. You're not you're not just an angry person, but you're allowed to be disappointed. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to feel sad. Those are all perfect human emotions. And I suppose in doing my work, I have to model that. I always tell myself, who am I to do this work with the men that sit in my chair or the men that walk alongside me in the barbershop if I don't do this with myself? And so that's why I'm so open about my story and just transparent about it, because it is what it is. Like, all of us are struggling, all of us. And being a barber, I've had the honor of and privilege of cutting men that don't look like me, men who come from different, tiers of life, different, like wealthy, poor, rich, skinny, big, like all of us are the same. Shame doesn't discriminate. Pain does not discriminate. And so it's just connecting us all with this thing called vulnerability, which is scary as hell. But all of us feel it.
When you first started cutting hair, I imagine this was not the intention to create this space, or was it? Or how did you move into this area? Like, I feel like you're not a normal barber.
Well, I always wanted to do work with men. That I was always passionate about. My mates, because a lot of my mates had ended up in prison or were on, dealing drugs or addicted to drugs. So I wanted to always move in the space of talking with men. And so barbering just became a vehicle. I've always been creatively inclined. So, growing up and watching, for me, the different, like, to escape my life at home of the war zone of domestic violence, hip hop was a different window to life for me. And so, a kid from New Zealand, from Aotearoa on the other side of the world, close to Antarctica, watching these, brown, black, colored skinned people talking about their issues and struggles, but making it look cool, And so that's why I resonated with Tupac a lot, because he talked about the Tupac that talked about Brenda's got a baby, the Tupac that talked about, keep your head up and uplifting our woman, not the Tupac that was so misogynistic and, but the guy that just was for the people. There was a Tupac that resonated with me. And so, because of hip hop, finding freedom and space to be creative and outspoken, I loved the fashion. And so that's what got me into barbering, was seeing the dope fades, the cool haircuts of the Black culture.
I love that. I remember myself when I was 16, 17, I was delivering auto parts and listening to the radio, and that song Changes by Tupac, that starts with the cool piano riff at the beginning, like right? And I remember he was perhaps one of my first inspirations in terms of creativity and writing. Like I remember I like felt that song, and then would start to play, and like something in my body came up. And so it's so interesting how I was like, 17-year-old white dude driving around in the suburbs, but like loving the feelings that he was communicating through his poetry, really. So that inspired you to get into hair. And then was there a moment when you were cutting hair or starting the barber journey in which you realized, like, hang on a minute, I can perhaps use this occupation as a vehicle for transformation or for inspiring change?
Yes, definitely. It was. I still remember the story vividly. It was late at night. You got to picture this, like my little barber tin shed. I'm in the hood in my city, and so my shed was open from 6 a.m. to midnight some nights, some days. And he was my last client. He came in. It was his first time. And it would have been a scary as, he's not from the hood, but he walked in, and it's right at the back of the property, my little garden shed. And, it was a home full of boys. So he's probably thinking, oh, all these guys walking around the house. But he came to my little garden shed, and he was quiet. And I just remember cutting his hair. And, we connected on our fathers loving alcohol. And, he didn't talk much, but I just cut his hair. And I remember if you've gone to the barbers, or a hairdresser, the stylist usually shows you the finished product with a little mirror behind the back of your head, showing you your haircut using the reflection of the big mirror. And I remember Liam was his name. And I remember he looked up and he stared in the mirror for a long time. And then these tears just started coming down his face, started rolling down his face. It was the first time anyone cried in my chair. And I remember I asked him, "Are you all right? Like, are you all good, bro?" And he said to me, in the most vulnerable voice, he said, "I had planned for this haircut to be my last haircut, as in this haircut is the haircut for my funeral after I was going to take my own life." And my heart just stopped, like you could hear it. And I couldn't say anything to that. I just grabbed him. I literally grabbed him, and we just cried. We stood there crying, hugging on my shoulder. And I remember he walked out of my little garden shed, turned around, and he said to me, "Thank you so much for seeing me tonight." And it was those words, "Thank you for seeing me tonight." I knew he wasn't talking about fitting him in for a haircut. It was, I seen him, I made space to see the little boy who was reaching out for help. And all I did was give him a haircut, and we connected on our dads. But it was just seeing him. And I realized then that all of us want to be seen, want to be loved, want to be known. But it's so scary to do that, because our experiences of showing people who we really are, we get mocked at, we get judged, and then we quickly go back into our Batman cave.
You had this great line in your TED Talk that I wrote down, which was, "We mock our way to respect." I'd never heard it phrased like that, but I feel like that really succinctly summarizes a lot of the male culture. Like, we use criticism and mocking in order to impress our peers. Do you mind unpacking that a bit? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm Samoan. I was born here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but my parents immigrated from Samoa in the 60s. And so in Samoan culture, it's now become culture to mock your way, through hard feelings. If someone falls over, or if someone, says something silly that doesn't make sense, or doesn't spell a word properly or doesn't pronounce a word properly, we just start laughing at them. Like, it's our way of making ourselves feel comfortable or feel better than the person who's feeling the shame. Or sometimes it's our way of trying to ease, using laughter as a tool to make people not feel so awkward. Either way, it's been I suppose it's made its way. The mocking culture is just so prevalent in male and masculinity, that it shuts out other. It avoids us from feeling any other emotion.
It's like a crutch almost to avoid feeling the things that we don't want to feel, right?
Totally. So mocking culture is massive, and so I've made it a rule in our barbershop. We don't mock. We don't mock other barbers. We don't mock each other. Like, that's not funny. And then and you get to the root of it by asking hard questions like, well, what feeling, what emotion or feeling are you avoiding? That you'd rather mock someone and dehumanize someone else to make yourself feel better? And then guys are just like, okay, what the heck? Why you gotta ask hard questions for? But that's the truth. Let's get down to the nitty gritty of it.
It sounds like that you are pursuing realness, right? It's like, no bullshit in this barbershop. Like, no sarcasm, no pettiness. It's like, what's really going on? Like, take the mask off, hang it at the door. Like, you're safe here. I got you. And I'm going to give you a sweet haircut.
Yeah. And it's scary. Like, I mean, my daughter, who, when she was in high school, secondary, she's at college now, university, but she would often tell me, he's like, man, my teachers there are scared of you. I was like, why are they scared? Like, they always tell me, like, your dad's barbershop is not a shop that we want to come into because we'll probably just end up crying. I'm just like, that is so sad that we've it's so normal now to run away from these feelings, which is so actually a part of how we are inclined and wired to feel and be emotional. But how they just wouldn't want to come to the barbershop, or my barbershop in particular, because they don't want to cry. So it's like, what feelings are we all running away from and hiding from, and what masks are we wearing today to survive the day? Yeah.
It's interesting when you first said that her teacher is scared of your barbershop. I in my head thought, oh, because you're like a big tattooed looking tough guy, right? And it's interesting that that's not the case at all, that you're actually expressing emotions and creating a space for feelings that these people don't necessarily want to feel. But I think that becomes the work, right? At least in the industry that I'm in and the topics that we're discussing, it's like we need people to feel deeply. That's how we change things, right?
Yeah.
I want to go back to what you said a few minutes ago about that your relationship with your dad was challenging right up until your mom passed away. And you said your mom passed away only 8 months ago or so, the end of last year. And how is your relationship with your dad now? Like, what's going on with that? Or how do you navigate that? Because it sounds like he's not necessarily... Well, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. How are things?
Yeah, me and my father are still in a relationship. But it's a relationship with boundaries, with a lot of boundaries. Not walls, but boundaries, And so how I navigate it is I see, for me, in the work of healing and redemption and believing this, I've sat with some of the worst, whom society would deem the worst in this country. I've sat with guys who are doing time for 20, 30 years behind the wire. And the only reason why I can sit with these men and knowing what they've, the horrific pain that they've, created in society is because I can sit with my old man. I choose to sit with my old man and continue to do the work and give him hope. I take my children around there once a week. I pick up my dad and take him to my son's game. And then I drop him off home. I'll buy him dinner a few nights, some nights here and there. But it's very boundary, I don't spend time with him all the time because, he just, he chooses to drink still. Alcohol is still a companion of his. And, in the last days of my mother, before my mum passed away, he was, I suppose it was mum now in her deathbed and she couldn't do much, death had stripped everything away. And so dad was left to look after and nurture mum. And so he was given this opportunity, but he still struggled because mum had been his rescuer. Mum had been his helper for 40 plus years. Mm. And so when the roles were reversed, it then highlighted like, Dad, you just suck at this. And so ownership needs to be taken on both parts. Mum, being the rescuer, and then Dad using mum as his rehab centre. And so weeks before mum passed away, my dad got physically or verbally violent with her, and their sons stepped in and said, no, enough is enough. Like, mum's only got a few weeks left, and you can pack your stuff and leave. It's either you give up your alcohol, stop drinking, and we've given him, we've laid all the stuff out with him for you, but mum's always chosen to go back. I said, mum's now weak, she can't do anything, so we're going to, stand in the gap for her. And we laid the boundaries down, laid the rules, and he chose his alcohol over spending the last few weeks with mum. And so, yeah, we still had those boundaries, and it was something we were always navigating for it because my dad refuses to do the work. And, he's in his late 60s now, when alcohol's been such a companion to him, it's his go-to, and you can try and offer the help and take him to the doctors and, bring people around to the house that can talk to him and speak to him in his native tongue. At the end of the day, the ball is in his court and he refuses to do the work. But for me, I don't allow that to bring shade or any, discomforts to the work that I'm doing, because it's real. This comes from a real place. It's my lived experience. Like, this is the story of She Is Not Your Rehab is not fabricated or made up. Like, this is an ongoing process, an ongoing journey for where I'm at in life. And so I have boundaries, and I honestly say he's a better grandfather than he was a father. And I say I love my father because that's how I choose to see him. I choose to see the kid in him that was hurt himself and neglected and rejected, and that has obviously taken over his life, or he's allowed it to. But that's the eyes I choose for myself to see my father. Those are the lenses I choose to see him through.
Mm. Yeah, I love this quote from Gabor Mate. It says, "Don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain."
Yes,
and it sounds like that's.
I love Gabor Mate. Can we just adopt him to be our dad,
bro? If you've got any connections and you got an email, I would happily write a draft email with you, and we could propose that. I would love that. Yeah, man. But it reminds me of that. Like, so my own mom was she always scolds me. She is an alcoholic, but she's just in recovery. So she's 9 years sober. And for me, it was a lesson in helplessness is how I've described it, of like a real embodied lesson in caring very deeply about somebody, but also being helpless to change them. And also loving them regardless. Like loving them as they are, right? And it sounds like you've come to that place with your dad of like, he's going to make his choices. And like, as a consequence, I can see him in this way on these days, and I will not tolerate this, and this, but like, I'm going to have him in my life. And, you kind of, I think you said the tender hurt boy in him, right? Like the suffering that's at the root of it, all these big masks. But I'm curious, how is he a better grandfather than a father? Like, in what ways do you see that playing out?
Because he's more present when my kids are. When I take my kids over to his house, he's just present with them, and he laughs and plays with them. And my kids will never be subjected to the same, the childhood monster that I was. They've never heard it. Even though my kids know my story, it's almost they find it hard to believe. Like, is that really great? Was that really granddad? I'm like the granddad you guys see today is what matters,
Right. And he's like, I imagine in his 60s or 70s now. So he's
late 60s. He's in his retirement age, but he's still working hard.
Yeah. And then how old are your kids?
My kids, our oldest girl is 18. and our middle child is 6, and our baby is 3. Our baby girl is 3.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So it would be difficult for them, I imagine, to hear your stories of this man and then see him as the kind grandpa that plays with them and laughs a lot. And it's like, what do you mean? Like, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned also towards the beginning of our chat that you're working with prisoners. I hadn't heard anything about that. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? What's that about? I'm intrigued.
So our whole heart of working, it's always been a dream of mine to go behind the wire and help our men. And for me, it was, growing up and how we grew up, our father did a lot of time behind the wire. My dad went to prison a lot, and every time we would visit him, it sucked, seeing your dad, your Superman, on the opposite side of the window, talking to him through a glass. And I was always the kid that hoped when dad got out, he would be better. When dad got out, he wouldn't beat mum up. When dad got out, he would stop drinking. He would be more present with us. But that just wasn't our story. And so I know that there's a lot of programs in prison, but for me, I wanted something that was accessible, something that just went down to the heart and the root of our issues, asking hard questions and encouraging men to, to do the work. What does doing the work look like? It means visiting their inner child who, and reprogramming, reparenting him, reinterpreting to him what happened as a child. And I mean, that's the work I've had to do with myself, reparenting myself and reinterpreting stuff that happened to me that I thought, was just horrific. But when I do that work, it is met with tears, but I find myself now more emotionally present with my own children. And so, we started with barbering. Barbering was just a vehicle going in and teaching these men how to cut hair. But then it was from cutting hair that these conversations will start. And then more men would come into these groups at behind the wire, and they were just interested in asking questions like, how do you forgive your father? How do you forgive the men that raped you? All the hard questions. And we will talk about it. And I suppose I had it connected with these men because in prison, you're going to get the version of Matt Brown that's raw and authentic. It's graphical, it's, trigger warnings everywhere, but it's these men connect to it, it's relatable because it's their story. My story is only a teardrop in the massive bucket of or in the ocean of domestic violence that happens in our backyard. That's why. And so and with the ongoing work, we wrote our book, She Is Not Your Rehab, which we have worked hard to find funding and people who want to give money to purchase enough books to go to every single man in prison in our country, which we have succeeded in doing.
No shit.
Yeah, so every man will get a book. We're just because of COVID, the shipping and all that has slowed down. All the books are getting made in Australia, but they're coming here, and so hopefully each man will get a book before Christmas this year, behind the wire. So and we know that a lot of our men don't read as well, and so that's why we recorded an audio book in my voice, so the men knew it was me. And it's reading my story out loud was very hard.
Yeah. So every male prisoner in New Zealand is going to receive a copy of your book.
Yes,
that's incredible.
Yeah, it's very cool. We thought amazing.
Yeah, you seem like somebody that sets large goals and then attains them. So, for example, I remember seeing a video with The Rock is like wearing your T-shirt or something like that. Talk to me about how that happened.
Yeah, I mean, for all our work with our co-pop, our movement, we just wanted to be accessible and tangible and palatable for people. And so every White Ribbon Day here in New Zealand, we do a campaign. And so last year's campaign, because Mum was sick, her story is close to my heart. We wanted to write a letter to The Rock. We roped in my son. He was 5 years old then, and he wrote a letter to The Rock. We recorded his voice. He hustled $100 out of us for it. He's like, "Am I going to get paid for this?" I was like, "Yes, we'll give you $100." And so he did. And we wrote a letter to The Rock, to get behind this movement. She's Not Your Rehab, and it was a letter from Angelo to The Rock talking about family violence and his dad's upbringing. And we had Mum in the video as well. Her sick talking to Angelo, and it resonated. We got a private message. Everyone tagged The Rock in it. Poor guy probably got sick of his name being tagged in it. I think he got tagged in it like 10,000 times. And so obviously he was forced to respond back. But it was beautiful. We got a private message from a close friend who's an artist of the family that, The Rock and his wife sat around with the family and they watched the video and they just all cried. And The Rock responded on his Instagram and Facebook, just saying how the story resonated with him. It reminded him of Angelo is pictured sitting with my mum, his nana, in the video, and The Rock said, it reminded him of how he used to sit with his nana, and she would talk to him and say the same things to him. And so, it was beautiful. And our goal wasn't actually to reach The Rock. Our goal was just to get our Polynesian community to engage in the conversation about family violence, that enough is enough. For too long, our women have survived instead of thriving. And so enough was enough. We need to stand up and say no more to family violence. Own your shit. Transform it instead of transmitting it.
I love that. And what's next for you in terms of She Is Your Rehab? Where do you see it going? What would be your ideal scenario?
Well, we ship worldwide, so it's on Book Depository, which ships international shipping. We are on the New Zealand #1 best-selling book since its release 3 weeks ago. It's been up there #1 for the last 3 weeks. We want it to be international, and so we've had a lot of prisons all around the world, from America to Brazil to Mexico, have written in wanting our book. And so, we wanted to be a global. It's already a global movement, but we wanted to really get in there, infiltrate culture, pop culture, and we need to have these discussions, these conversations. People talk about you're creating a new form of masculinity. I don't see. For us, how we work is this has always been our indigenous way. Pacific men have always been nurturers of women. Before we were warriors, we were gardeners. Men used to carry our children on their shoulders when the missionaries came here and recorded it. There's findings, research showing that Maori men, Pacific men, used to carry their children on their shoulders going to work. It wasn't until, colonization and alcohol was introduced, that's where, a lot of the violence came.
Are you familiar with the documentary called The Work? Have you seen that before? It's about...
Is that the one in prison?
Yeah, they do circle in prison. I had the director of that program on the podcast, Eldra Jackson III. Wow. That might be a really good potential connection, at least, because those guys are doing really powerful work in American penitentiaries. I think in Folsom Prison. I just need to. I'll send you some information after we.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I love what you're doing, man. I have so much time for it. I have so much. I'm just like really proud of you. I don't even know you, but I was like, I'm really proud of you, man. And I'm really hopeful that the work that you're doing is creating positive change. I'm behind it 100%. Where can people find you on the internet? How can they get involved? How can they support the movement?
Man, honestly, we want to go international more, and I know it's working towards that way. We've got a lot of cool people behind us, but for more information to support the movement, the kaupapa we call it, jump onto our website, sheisnotyourrehab.com, or our Instagram at sheisnotyourrehab, or even Facebook. We're on all social media platforms. Twitter's not massive here in New Zealand, but I've jumped on it and follow something. I know it's a bit crazy on Twitter, so I try and stay away from it.
A little bit. So you're spreading the word. I know that you have T-shirts people can buy. I'll include links to all of these things in the show notes. If you're listening right now, follow him on Instagram, get involved. Brother, thank you much for your time and energy. I appreciate your honesty, your realism. It's inspiring and infectious. And I'm just glad I got to connect with you, man. And if I'm ever in New Zealand, I'm gonna hit you up. I'm gonna come to your shed. I'm like, Matt,
Yes, please.
make me handsome.
Well, it's no longer a shed; it's a barbershop now. But
you've got a whole shop. Are you gonna just keep the one barbershop? You're gonna spread around?
We've got a barbershop here. Our barbershop here holds 9 chairs, so it's stunning. Yeah. 9 chairs of guys, 9 barbers, 9 guys in the chair getting a haircut, and then you got about 9 guys waiting. And it's appointment based, and so the conversations are just infectious. Like it's always ongoing. Guys are disagreeing with each other or laughing. But it's I've had the honor of witnessing men, the toughest men in society, cry in these chairs. With other men surrounding them. Yeah. And it's all just it's more than just a haircut.
I feel like that would be a great reality show, like a reality TV show. All right, brother. I will.
We have been asked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
not interested.
MTV approached us a while ago, and I was like, oh,
yeah, didn't feel right.
No, not right. Not in the. I'm not in the work of exposing people. Yeah. Other than myself and my family. No.
You're like, you want to make me a diva? That's fine. Like, not the. Yeah. All right, brother. I will let you. I'll let you go. Get back to it. Thanks for your time. And
thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you for having me, bro. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So much.
He's good, right? He's obviously done a lot of work on himself and his past to share in such a vulnerable and healthy and inspiring manner. Matt Brown, as I mentioned, he has a organization called She Is Not Your Rehab. Check out their shirts. Check them out on Instagram. I've included links in the show notes for all of this stuff. Give him a follow. Give him a like. Watch his TED Talk too, actually. His TED Talk is really good. I loved it. And at the end especially, watch till the very end, because there's a bit of a surprise that will maybe bring a tear to your eye. It's impressive. Okay, that's it. Thanks for the 5-star reviews. Please do leave a review. It does make a difference. Thanks for sharing this. If you know somebody that would love to hear it, go ahead and send it along. And you can find me online at Long Distance Love Bombs. If you want to learn more, get in my space. Thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you soon.